Good evening. Welcome to the Artisan bread class. A friend and neighbor of mine, Sue Chase, is an expert in baking breads. And this is Austin Atkinson talking. And anyway, Sue's brought her doTERRA Oils artisan bread to several classes that we've held, and they are so delicious. We just had to teach you all how to make them too. And this is a perfect month to do it, sandwiched right in between our Summer Sensation special, so you'll know a really great way to use some of those oils. And Sue gave me a private cooking class yesterday, and I am thrilled to tell you that this is a lot easier and faster than I ever imagined. So since I'm a person who needs all the little details for a recipe, you will get a lot of great detail tonight. So let me get over to our screen here. All right, the very yummiest bread is made from fresh ground wheat. So if you have a wheat grinder, you'll want to grind some white wheat, and depending on weather and other conditions, you'll probably need somewhere between 4 to 8 cups, possibly up to 12 if it's really wet, so just kind of depending on where you are. All right, so you're going to start out by putting 3 tablespoons of SAF instant yeast, or its equivalent, into 1 cup of warm water, and this is about 110 degrees, unless you're someone who keeps your yeast in the freezer, in which case it would be just a little bit hotter. Now let the yeast and water mixture sit together until you see it have a bubbly reaction like the one in the picture here. All right, next you can add 1 cup of sourdough starter if you'd like. We did not have any sourdough starter, so we completely left it out. Then you'll also add 3 tablespoons of sugar and 2 cups of high gluten flour. In this case, we got the high gluten flour from Bosch. And then you want to mix in your mixer with a regular whisk on the lowest speed for about 30 seconds. Let it sponge or sit for about 10 minutes. All right, the next step is to add essential oils to taste. So here are a few of the combinations that you can use. You can do 3 to 4 drops of black pepper. You can do with 2 drops of cilantro and 2 drops of basil. And actually, Sue just barely got here, so we'll bring her in. Let her in. Hold on 1 second. Sue just arrived, which is really exciting because that way she'll be able to answer questions at the end of the class. All right. Hopefully this little break will give you some time to write down some of these. So anyway, what's really nice is that you can put together a lot of different combinations with your oils. And these are some that Sue has used before that she really likes. At the end, we'll show you that there are some toppings that you put on the bread to make it really delicious and help the flavor to pop. And for example, this one in the top center, the black pepper and lemon, she actually uses lemon pepper to put on the top of that one. Anyway, you can just use whatever sounds good. And she actually has made the bread with the black pepper and lavender and assures me that it's very good. Does it taste kind of different?
Well, lavender is very, very good in different things. And you can actually crumble up the lavender flowers and put into it too. But I've used the lavender oil with the olive oil on the top of it.
All right. So anyway, this gives you a couple of ideas of what you can use in your breads, and it really helps the flavor to pop. Now, one thing that I learned yesterday that I was not aware of is that you can actually taste a little pinch of the dough to see if the oil or the flavor of the dough is like you like it. It sounds kind of gross, right? But you actually can taste the oil come through. So if you think it's too weak or would like to add a little bit more, you actually can taste test that. All right, going on. So the next thing we're going to add is amaranth, and this is something that's high in protein and very good. However, it is optional, so if you don't have any on hand and you still want to make the bread, you can go forward. So this is what amaranth looks like. It's very tiny, and you're going to pop it like you would pop popcorn right over the stove. So you're going to heat up the pan, and I'll show you a picture here in a second. Notice how tall that pan is. You actually leave it open. You don't put a lid on it. Heat that up to about medium-high, and add about a teaspoon of amaranth at a time. so that you can see how much you need to get up to 2 cups of amaranth. And this is what it looks like right here. See on the top left, it's just those little teeny kernels are starting to pop. And on the right, it's really popping. And it's really fun to watch. It just turns into a whole little white popping brigade, like little mini popcorns. All right, so next you're going to add the 2 cups of amaranth to the mixture, and you're going to mix it on the lowest speed with a regular wire whisk. And then you're going to add 1 tablespoon of real salt, plus you're going to use 2 tablespoons of organic sunflower, or you can use olive oil, and then 1 tablespoon of rice vinegar. Now the rice vinegar is one of Sue's specialties. It's one of her what do we call it? Signature.
Well, we replace the rice vinegar instead of using either anything that has like, oh, can't even think what it is. It's dough enhancer. And instead of using dough enhancer, I use the rice vinegar. And you use the same amount of rice vinegar as you would yeast.
So there's a little trick, and you do this in all your breads, don't you, Sue? She's nodding. So she does that in all of her breads. That's a great trick and helps things to be really organic. All right, then you're going to add 2 cups of cool water, and at first the mixture is going to look something like this, a little bit lumpy, a little bit choppy there. And then it will look like this once you get it blended to the amount that you need it to go. And then you are going to switch out the whisk for a dough hook. So we just showed our little dough hook right there. And we're going to start adding the flour. Now, Sue uses, in the bread that we made yesterday, we used sprouted wheat flour, which is really good. And you're going to start with about 2 cups because you're going to need at least 2 cups. And how much flour would you say we used? So she says we used 5 cups of flour yesterday. So she says we used about 5, but you really want to watch it. Anytime you do more than 2 cups, you want to just add it really gradually so that you don't end up with too much. It's always better to add more than it is to try to take it away. So we're going to show you a few pictures of what this looks like as it's getting going. So that's not quite ready yet. It's still kneading. Still kneading. So you see on the left-hand side, it's barely starting to pull away from the sides. That's exactly what you're watching for, is for it to pull away from the sides. And that's when you know that you've added enough flour. And so here, there's enough flour. You can see that it's completely pulled away from the sides. And now we're going to knead it for about 6 minutes. Now, if you don't have a kneading fixture on your mixer, you can also take that out and knead it by hand. All right, so after our dough has kneaded, you can see that it's ready to remove from the bowl. And at this point, you can just touch it with your fingers. And if your fingers don't come away with really sticky dough on them, then you know that your dough's ready. So Sue just barely touched it with her fingers, and there was just a teeny bit of residue there, but pretty clean. So that's what you're looking for. You do want it just to be a tad sticky. If it's kind of tacky, I would say would be a better word for it. It's a little bit tacky, because if it's not tacky at all, you've probably added too much flour, and then it's not going to have the same texture. So Sue says that if it's not tacky, you'll want to add just a little bit more water, but again, really just minute amounts, right? And so everything should happen at this point in really tiny amounts so you can get the right consistency that you need. And bread's kind of interesting because if you live in a really humid climate, you'll add less water, more flour, and if you're in a dry climate, you'll add, the opposite. All right, so now in order to get the dough from the bowl, here's a nice little trick. Spray your hand with some PAM, or some nonstick spray, I should say. Rub your hands together and then also spray the surface that the dough will be worked on. So that cutting board area is where we worked on the dough. All right, then it easily pulls away from the sides of the bowl there, and then you knead it. Now, if you have never kneaded bread before, the way you do it is you just push it down with both of the heels of your hand, and then you'll hold on to the top part of the dough and fold it towards you in half and push it down with your heels, and then you're going to turn the dough by about 45 degrees and repeat. So the dough should feel really smooth and elastic at this point. And to probably turn this dough, I would say around 15 to 20 times as I watched her, just gently pushing and turning and pushing and turning. What's really nice is that when you are kneading by hand, you really cannot over-knead it. You can, however, over-knead it in a mixer. So if you feel like you're not positive, it would be better to remove it earlier from the mixer and to continue kneading it on the countertop or on a cutting board. All right. Next, you're going to cut the dough into 4 to 5 sections. In our case, we cut it into 4 sections. And then you're going to put down a piece of parchment paper. Now, some parchment paper you can get already in sheets like this that are just right for a cooking sheet. Or you can get it from any grocery store, and then you have to, it comes on a roll, you know, like tin foil or plastic wrap. But you'll just get a piece of parchment paper and put it down on the area that you just sprayed, and it's actually going to stick on the bottom of the paper, which is what you want because it makes it very easy to work with. Then you're going to spray the top of the parchment paper, which is also going to make it very easy to work with. And you're going to put one section of the dough on the parchment paper, and you'll push that flat with your hands. Oh my goodness. All right. Now roll out the dough with a rolling pin until it's about 1/4 inch thick and as round as you can get it. If you have a small rolling, what is this called? Just a small rolling pin. So if you have a small roller like this, that's really ideal for working with the dough. But if you don't, hey, I think a rolling pin still works just fine. All right, so you'll want to get that as round as you can. And you'll adjust the circular shape with your fingers if you need to. See how she's just kind of pushing in with the edges of her fingers to make sure that that's a nice round shape. And then you use the very tips of your fingers to make indentations in the dough. And this is really an important step for capturing a lot of the flavor. And we'll show you why in just a second. So this is what your dough looks like after you have properly poked it. This is a great thing to do for therapy. Isn't this nice? She's nodding. If you're mad at anybody, just go ahead and poke and gouge. Have a great time. Get a little bit of citrus bliss afterwards to get that aggression out. All right. So then you're going to sprinkle about 1 to 2 tablespoons of olive oil over the top of the dough and smooth it around with your hand. And it'll look something like this. So you see you've got, and it's okay if some of the olive oil pools in some of those indentations. That's just fine because it's all going to even out as it gets baked. And now for the fun part. This is where you can be really creative. I should say the second fun part because we've already been somewhat creative with our oils. So at this point, you can add any toppings that you would like. And you can coordinate the toppings with the oils that you used in the dough. So on the top right here, we actually ground some kosher salt with some peppercorns. You can see the grinding going on there on the top left hand. And then also we added some rosemary. And this was kind of a cool little trick. If you take the rosemary and grind it into a coffee grinder, it comes out really fine. And so you get the taste of the rosemary, the fresh rosemary, or the rosemary, I should say, all over the bread. But it's not very coarse and pokey. So that's really nice.
Great for chicken too.
Oh, and she says it's also good for chicken as well. And then another flavor that I love on this bread is the crushed garlic. It's like a garlic paste. So you would add about half to 1 teaspoon of the crushed garlic and just rub it around. And of course, we didn't measure anything. We just kind of eyeballed everything because that's how real cooks do it. Right, Sue? She's nodding. So anyway, spread that around. And then we added some salt and pepper and some Parmesan cheese on it, and then just a little bit of mozzarella, which was phenomenal. But she's also used cheddar cheese, mushrooms, caramelized onions, blended tomatoes. What's really yummy is if you blend the tomatoes and you put the sauce over the top of the pizza, and this actually is a really great pizza dough. And then you can cook that. And then another thing that you can do is if you make a real herby kind of an artisan bread, you need to, or you can actually put some fresh slices of veggies over the top after it bakes, which is really nice. So just use your imagination, whatever tastes really good to you or whatever sounds really good. You can add anything on these. And if you are using this as a pizza dough, you'd want to put all of your toppings on beforehand unless they were the fresh kind that you're adding on afterwards. All right, so if you have a pizza peel, to get the dough into the oven, that makes it really convenient so you don't burn yourself. Now we have preheated the oven to 500 degrees, and we have put a pizza stone inside the oven. So that pizza stone is preheated up to 500 degrees, which is why that pizza peel makes it so nice to work with. And you're going to just stick it right underneath the parchment paper and cook the dough right on the parchment paper, just like this. And you'll cook it for about 6 minutes, 5 to 6 minutes, until it's golden brown. This is just perfect. And you notice that the parchment paper is a little bit browned and burned. That's normal. That happens every single time, but it doesn't affect the flavor of the pizza at all. It's just what happens to the paper. And then you're going to repeat that process until you've made all 4 to 5 pieces of that dough into artisan bread. And we changed it up on every single one. So the one that we did yesterday, we actually put 4 drops of black pepper and 2 drops of rosemary is the flavor that we used, and it was delicious. And so on the top one there, we've got kosher salt and pepper, and the rosemary. The one on the left has some black pepper and kosher salt, rosemary, together with mozzarella and cheddar cheese. And Sue said she really likes to make that one into a pizza with that, since she doesn't like the marinara sauce too much. So she'll use that, and then she'll cut the fresh veggies on it after it comes out of the oven. And then with the one on the right, we made it with the crushed garlic paste, salt and pepper, Parmesan cheese, and mozzarella cheese. And this is the encore. This is absolutely phenomenal, the creamy cilantro dressing. So she brought this over, and we dipped our bread in this, and it was so yummy. I could not get enough of it. And I went out to lunch with my girlfriends today and took everybody a piece of the focaccia bread that we made, and everyone loved it. So it just really pops that flavor, because you have so much flavor in the bread itself, but you don't have all the herbs to bite into. So it's really a neat texture together with the flavor that you get. You don't expect getting that kind of flavor with the smooth texture. All right, so for creamy cilantro dressing, you're going to blend together 1/2 cup buttermilk, 1/2 cup mayo, 1/2 cup sour cream, a package of the dry ranch buttermilk dressing mix, 2 drops of cilantro oil, 6 stalks of green onions, 4 golden pepperoncini, a drop of lime oil, and a teaspoon of sugar. And this is delicious. Oh, Sue says that you can also, if you don't have lime oil or if you prefer lemon, you can replace the lime oil with a drop of lemon oil instead. And you can also replace the cilantro oil with some basil oil, so you can kind of flavor this to taste. And then you enjoy. And our family got 2 of these focaccia breads, and that is all that's left. We've been eating it right down. And I just want to thank Sue Chase so much for sharing her recipes and expertise with us. And I'm going to stop the recording, and we will open this up for questions.